I hate Kalkwasser. Well, alright, I don't hate it, I love the stuff. But there are several things I've discovered over the 18 months or so I've been using it that I think some people will hate. So today I'm going to share those with you so you can decide if calc is right for you. And of course, all of this is based on my own experiences. So if you've used calc and you have different experiences to me, share them with the community in the comment section below. Right, enough disclaimers, let's get stuck in. First up is that Kalkwasser is messy stuff. You can't buy it in pre-mixed form like you can with certain two-part dosing solutions, which means you need to buy it in powdered form. And I tend to spill the stuff at some point every time I mix up a new batch, much to the annoyance of Mrs. Reef Dog. And the messiness doesn't stop once you've mixed it up, and the outlet will almost certainly splash white crustiness onto your sump. And if you don't clean that off regularly, it does get very crusty indeed, and will take a fair amount of elbow grease to get it off after a few months. Now, while my two-part dosing is less messy, it does still generate some creamy looking splashback, and I found that I get minimal mess now I dose Kalkwasser into the middle of my sump and straight into a power head. So the problem isn't just unique to Kalkwasser, and you can mitigate it, but make no mistake, Kalkwasser is messy and may make your sump look like a plasterer's radio. Related to that is that Kalkwasser clogs the outlet of whatever dosing line you use to dose the stuff. On my Kalkwasser stirrer, that took a long time to manifest, but now it's happened, I have to periodically clean the goopy buildup from the tip, and the same applies to the John Guest tubing I use to dose Kalkwasser on my water box. I only clean the John Guest tubing tip every 6 months or so, but my Kalkwasser stirrer is more susceptible to completely clogging up, so I tend to clean the nozzle every 2 to 3 weeks. The third thing I hate about Kalkwasser is that it loses potency over time. Full strength Kalkwasser has a pH of 12.4, which is what makes it so good at increasing pH in our reef tanks, and that is what makes it so beneficial to our corals. But as it absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere, the pH levels start to dip, making it less effective. And when I left my Kalkwasser unchanged for about 3 months, my pH dropped from 8.2 to 8.08 in my tank. And because pH is a logarithmic scale, a 0.1 drop meant that my tank water was twice as acidic as it was before. I emptied and cleaned the Kalkwasser stirrer, and with fresh Kalkwasser, the pH got back to its usual level within 48 hours, but to get the best out of Kalkwasser, you really should refresh your calc at least every 6 to 8 weeks, and best practice is probably to do so, or at least add a little new powder every 2 to 3 weeks. Number 4 is that Kalkwasser takes up space. Because you can only dissolve a maximum of 1.5 grams of calc powder into a litre of RODI water, you will need a large container to store the stuff. On my 40-gallon waterbox LPS tank, I dose 800 ml of calc per day, which means this hefty 10-litre container needs to be refilled after less than 2 weeks. Now that does get around the problem of losing potency over time, but it also generates more fish tank admin, which nobody likes. And if you want to reduce your fish tank admin, you'll need a larger container, so you can kiss goodbye to any spare space you have around your tank, and good luck getting your significant other to agree to a 3-foot plastic vat sitting in your living room. Next is that you have to make separate provision for trace elements. Some two-part dosing solutions like the ATI Essentials Plus I use contain various trace elements, meaning you don't have to buy further bottles to add each of the many trace elements our corals consume. But Kalkwasser doesn't do that at all, and it only replaces calcium and alkalinity. Now, I personally don't worry about that for the most part. My LPS heavy water box looks fantastic on Kalkwasser alone, and the only trace element I make provision for is manganese for my Goniopora corals. Now, I have no intention of adding separate trace elements to this tank, and my corals are as colourful as healthy as I could possibly want them to be. But on my main SPS dominated tank, I do like that my 2-part dosing adds trace elements every day. And I don't think I'd want to run Kalkwasser on its own on that tank, in part for that reason. So if trace elements are your thing, you'll need to think about how you get them into your system if you're only dosing Kalkwasser. And because Kalkwasser only replaces calcium and alkalinity, number 5 on my list is that you will also need to make separate provision for magnesium. Now, with large water changes, my water box lasted a good 6 months on Kalkwasser alone before I noticed magnesium levels dropping. But drop they did, and now I dosed magnesium separately, so I no longer have a 1-part dosing solution for the tank, and I've had to add an extra dosing pump. You can get Kalkwasser solutions that claim to contain magnesium, but magnesium isn't soluble in saturated Kalkwasser, so that is nothing more than marketing and won't increase your magnesium levels in your tank. Replenishing magnesium in your tank though is an easy fix, and you can just buy magnesium in a bottle from companies like Red Sea, but it's a drawback nonetheless that will put some people off. And finally, related to that is that you can't increase calcium or alkalinity separately. With normal 2-part dosing solutions, you dose 1 bottle to take care of your alkalinity and 1 to deal with calcium. And if your corals uptake the 2 in different amounts, no problem, you can just dial in each bottle as needed. But Kalkwasser is a 1-bottle solution, so you can't adjust calcium and alkalinity individually. And when calcium levels dropped to 380 parts per million on my water box, I tried dosing much more Kalkwasser in the hope that it would increase calcium as well as alkalinity, but while it bumped up alkalinity quite significantly, the increase had very little effect on calcium, so I had to dose calcium separately to get it back above 420 parts per million. Now on my main tank I dose 2-part as well as Kalkwasser, so I can increase calcium easily with the calcium bottle of my 2-part solution. But on my water box I may have to add a 3rd dosing pump to deal with calcium, at which point Kalkwasser will be just 1 part of a 3-part dosing solution. And at that point, you'd be forgiven for questioning if Kalkwasser is really worth the hassle. So with all of that said, am I going to stop using Kalkwasser? Well, on one of my 3 tanks, yes I am. I want my Cade Nano to be low maintenance, and 2-part is better for that than Kalkwasser is, plus space is limited on this small tank, so where my 500ml dosing bottle only lasted 10 days on Kalkwasser, the same bottle with 2-part will last me 100 days. But I am sticking with Kalkwasser on my 2 main tanks. My LPS tank looks absolutely fantastic on calc, and my SPS tank unquestionably looks better than it did before I started dosing Kalkwasser. And I wouldn't want to lose the added benefit of increased growth rate that you get from not having suppressed pH levels, courtesy of Kalkwasser. And even on my Cade tank, I've only replaced Kalkwasser because I found a dosing solution called Reef's Elements pH Plus that claims to increase pH too, though in theory I shouldn't be losing out on the pH benefits. So while this video isn't intended as my breakup letter to Kalkwasser, it is intended to highlight the true downsides of calc so you can decide if it's right for you. The only thing I'll say in closing though is that while hearing the theory is all well and good, the only way you'll really know if Kalkwasser is right for you is by giving it a try yourself. So I'd still encourage you to do that, and if you want to do so, there's a link in the description for the Kalkwasser I buy, and you can watch my simple how-to guide next.